Alrighty. Yes, alrighty. Very good. Hello, everybody. Hello from F-Secure Labs. My name is Mikko. I'm the Chief Research Officer for F-Secure Corporation, and this here is Sean.
Hi.
This is Sean Sullivan, Security Advisor for F-Secure Labs, and this is our webcast for, well, 5th of September 2014. So, what do we have, Sean?
Well, H1, we've got havocs, we've got a major arrest, or at least a disruption rather, not an arrest, in Gameover Zeus. We have stats on mobile, and we've got stats on Windows.
So these are all based on the research we've been doing here in the labs, both our labs operating here in Helsinki, where we are right now, as well as our labs in other parts of the world, mostly in Malaysia, where we have our second largest lab. The research we've done over the last 6 months, the research we publish in our threat reports, and this threat report that I'm having in my hand right now will be published on Monday, so you can actually download it from our site, from our blog, or from our white papers page on Monday. So quite a bit of the latest statistics we have, couple of case studies of what's happening around the world, and numbers, and a little bit of forecasts where we think we're headed. And of course, when we think about statistics and numbers, there's quite a bit of constant action, which isn't really changing much. So if we have a look at the slide about PC malware detections that we actually outline in the paper, we'll see that well, we still have things like configure still year after year on the charts.
Yeah.
Are we going to get rid of that?
As soon as we get rid of XP.
Right. It's the XP problem. We'll get back to XP, but very, very large part of this 31% of all infections that we see in our statistics is caused by configure, and almost all of those are old, legacy, unsupported Windows computers.
And that's what our customers are being protected against. So it could just be a minority of rather active machines in their regions. So we're blocking configure. It's not that 31% of our customers are infected by configure.
Well, this is top 10 detections. When we detect something, we block it. So this is not top 10 infections, it's top 10 detections.
Detections, right. So then there are some, in the full report on Monday, there'll be a geographic breakdown of what regions this affects. The U.S. less, I think, like Brazil and stats from China more so.
Yeah.
So the noisy machines that are still infected with configure that our customers are being protected against exist in those regions, and regions that we also see higher rates of XP as well. So.
Right. I was actually in Brazil last week, and I checked the statistics for there. Brazil is actually #1 country in the world in our statistics for configure detection. So it's countries with long legacy of systems, and also countries which have a higher piracy rate, because when you're running pirated versions of applications or the operating system itself, patching is problematic, so that you have more security problems because of that. So another thing about configure, we still keep calling it, or you keep getting references with different names. Why do we still use the name down and down? Why do we just all call it configure?
Well, I think our detection name these days is configure.
Well,
there were 3 different names at first.
Okay. I think I still saw downloaded in our internal statistics last week.
Okay.
So
what's our original name for it, and then there was the configure working group that the industry came together.
Yes, and we always call it configure, but it's just confusing. But of course, it's a lost cause to talk about virus naming or malware naming, because that game has been lost 5 years ago.
Majava. Speaking of malware naming, Majava. Which means in Finnish beaver, but in this case it's malicious Java.
Malicious Java.
11%. That's down quite a bit from last year, when it was up to, I think it was 45% of all.
So good job, Oracle.
Yeah. So finally, the current versions of Java are such that there are too many hurdles in the way for Java to be easily exploited. Java plugins in the browser.
Java in the browser.
Yeah, to be easily exploited.
When we say bad things about Java, we are speaking about Java in the browser. And of course, it's not just that Java is getting better; it's that people are getting rid of Java.
Yeah, probably both, but finally, I suppose it's so we're seeing an increase in Flash actually among the others, the 38%, but Java, which was I guess 2013's punching bag. The stats are getting better on that.
Yes.
So
then we have other infections, which especially include file infectors, which is interesting because that's what we used to fight. We used to fight parasitic infections like real viruses, which would spread by infecting your own files, like your own executables. And when you would share them with other people, they would spread. And among those top detections, which don't make the actual count here in the slides, include Sality and Ramnit, which both are parasitic infector of existing files.
And still auto-run worms.
And auto-run worms, yeah. But especially these parasitic infectors are interesting. They do produce lots of noise, so they easily show up on stats more than they maybe should, but they clearly are very problematic and spreading globally. Sality infects executables, Ramnit infects executables and HTML files. So it actually, your existing HTML files that you have on your hard drive will get infected with a JavaScript redirector. And when you upload those HTML files to a website, those websites will infect users through remote exploits. So pretty clever and pretty effective way of spreading. So what do we know about the actual things that these then do the users? Configure does nothing, but and malicious Java redirects the user somewhere. But I guess there's a still quite a bit of ransomware.
Well, there's a resurgence of some ransomware, yes. Yeah, the web-based attacks on the MyJava, that's kind of related because the web-based attacks are detections of things redirecting to exploit sites. Java would be one of the exploits attempted. Bots, still seeing lots of bots, but yeah, we're seeing lots of different things that the bots have been used for in H1, not just ransomware, but also like just info gathering.
Sure. And one thing we've looked about quite a few times during H1 was the Synolocker ransom Trojan, which was an unusual ransom Trojan. Because we've seen ransom Trojans for Windows computers. We've seen them for Mac OS X computers. We've seen the Browlock Trojan, which blocks the browser, which works on your computer, on your phone, on your TV. We've seen smartphones infected, smart televisions infected with the Browlock Trojan. But the Synolocker is different. It's targeting your network server, like your NAS network storage server made by a company called Synology, which had a security vulnerability in one of their products, which then they were infecting in large scale. And the ransom Trojan takes over your server, encrypts your files, and then demands a payment to decrypt the files. And this was especially interesting because these guys were trying to get out of the business, right? Trying to shut down their operations when they were actually, while we were monitoring their websites, they were offering a database of all the existing decryption keys for sale, wholesale, to anybody who wanted to buy them and basically carry on their business.
Carry on the exploit for the extortion part of it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So they had already infected these users, they had already encrypted their files, now they just wanted to hand over the decryption keys to anybody who wanted to buy them for a couple of hundred bitcoins.
I don't know, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's 4 parts on our blog related to that, for a long post by the folks working on that case.
So that's the PC side of the picture. What about then the mobile malware? It's pretty split to 2, right? Well, actually, it's only really Android, isn't it?
Yeah, Android, Amazon variants, and jailbroken iOS devices.
Right. I set up, with the help of a guy called Esa Mäkinen, a Twitter account in the spring which retweets or tweets again what I tweeted 5 years ago. This account is on Twitter as Mikko 2009. And it's fascinating watching me tweet stuff from 5 years ago, including like SMS worms going around the world infecting Symbian-based devices. This was the problem we still had 5 years ago. And of course, it's completely disappeared in these 5 years. Now, and
like Symbian.
And Symbian, but that's what I mean. Symbian has disappeared.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is very specifically now an Android problem, and as you can see from the numbers we have in here. Regarding the mobile malware, there's quite a bit of action there. We did see 2 mobile SMS worms during this first half of the year. So something similar to what we used to see on the old Symbian devices, but these were Android-based malware. So what do we know about this one single iOS iPhone malware that we have in our charts?
For jailbroken,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was
It's called the Unfloat Baby Panda, right?
right because the guy who found it didn't know what to call it, and then somebody on Twitter threw something at him. And
No, actually, it's the guy who founded it is Stefan Esser from Germany,
Yeah.
who's been involved with the jailbreaking community for quite a while. And he made some offhand comment on Twitter about he should come up with a really
a branding name or a
yeah.
PR name for it because it was following up on the Heartbleed, and,
Right.
that had gotten noticed quite well because of the way that it had been presented, kind of with a name and a logo.
So he came up with Unfloat Baby Panda, and the name stuck. And
For some, I think it kind of crowdsourced that way. Yeah.
yeah. Now, so he was only targeting jailbroken iPhone devices, and once it infected an iPhone device, the actual payload was that when you were using the device, it would actually intercept your SSL outbound communications, and it would steal your iTunes passphrases. So to gain access to your iTunes account, it stole your UDID.
What can you do with an iTunes password?
You can buy iTunes gift cards and sell them on eBay.
Yeah. What else can you do with an iTunes password?
Well, there's been quite a bit of a. I think I understand what you're getting at.
Yeah, just dropping out of H1 for a moment. What else can you do with an iTunes password?
Well, you could go and get access to people's photo rolls and their iCloud backups, which is what happened to 100 celebrities just last week.
Yeah, same password.
Yeah, it's the same password. And one thing I've been
Documents and contacts and location and everything else is in iCloud.
My pet peeve about the iTunes authentication mechanism is that, and I've said this many times before, these accounts for most users, I guess for most of these celebrities, these accounts they had originally created for a completely different purpose. They originally most likely made this account when they had an iPod 10 years ago and they had to buy some music. So you have to make an account. So the use case, the security use case is that this is a username and password for music, which isn't very important. If someone else gets to listen to your music or even buy music as you, it's not the end of the world. But then the same account carried on when iPhones came around and when iPods came around. The same account carried over when MobileMe, the email accounts were introduced. The same account carried over when they introduced buying applications. The same password was used when they started using Photoroll and iCloud and online backups and remote wipe. So suddenly it controls everything. This is the most important password you have. It has your backups and it can be used to wipe your iPhone, your iPad, and your Macs. And these people, many of them, still probably had the original password from 10 years ago when they needed it to buy music from Lady Gaga.
Yeah. So besides phishing and guessing of security questions, there's also some attempts for jailbroken devices to steal that info from users out there. Not just for those cases, and I think they were in China, most of them.
Yeah.
Were probably to steal the iTunes password for the sake of buying media from iTunes Store, primarily.
Or gift cards.
Or gift cards. Yeah. So then.
Although there would be a great conspiracy theory here that Unfloat Baby Panda led to the celebrity photo leak. That didn't happen. Don't quote us on that. Okay, so then we had also mobile ransomware. Kolar was one of them, and Slocker another one. Kolar claimed it's actually from the same gang that's behind Reveton. It claims to be the cops. Your system has been locked. It also claims that all your files have been encrypted, which is a lie. It actually doesn't.
It's just actually playing a trick with the browser, maximizing so that you can't escape the application, which is full screen.
Yeah. So it turns your browser into full screen mode and prevents back from working, and then you're locked. That's what it claims, and says that you've been encrypted. Your files have been encrypted. You have to send money to get rid of this. But the other ransom Trojan we found during H1, Slocker, actually does encrypt your files, but it can't encrypt everything. Apps are limited on any mobile devices, but it can get access to your photos, so it will encrypt your photos, which is bad enough, unless you have a photo roll and it's getting back
up somewhere.
But still, it is. So what do we know about then the other kind of ransom case for mobile, the Australian Oleg case? Remember this? February or March?
Not actually.
Oleg Pliss, this guy who was using, again, iCloud passwords.
Oh, the Australian case, yes. That one, well, because before we get to that, the other part, the Slocker, That's the distribution is something we've seen in PCs a long time ago, where it's mainly being targeted at people visiting pornography websites. They're prompted to download some sort of video app or some sort of player, and then because they want to see the video, they throw common sense out the window and they install the app, and then that app maximizes. It's not spreading outside of that vector very much, but this is something that we saw on Windows PCs very much so in I want to say 2008, 2009. So it's and
we saw the same thing with dialer Trojans even before that, which we were making money by using your modem to dial out.
So it does require, it is a ransomware Trojan on Android that does require social engineering, but they're aiming it at targets on sites that has time-tested success in previous generations of operating systems. So it's
social engineering works better when people aren't thinking straight when they are trying to find fresh porn.
That's basically that's that one. The other one, the other case.
You aren't reading the EULA when you're looking for porn.
Yeah, there are people who are making questionable choices when they're trying to get free video players. The Australian case, that appears to have been a case of a popular app in Australia, perhaps was compromised, and that app had access to email addresses and passwords, and then the person who got a hold of that database reused those username and passwords on iCloud, and then used the Find My Phone, Lock My Phone feature, and instead of typing into the field lost, reward, and contact me at this phone number, they instead put in there, your phone is now locked, and pay a ransom to this PayPal address, which didn't exist, and then later it became some other payment scheme. But I think in Florida, there was a case in Florida, there was a case in the UK, but mainly it was Australian phones. So the suspicion is that it was a third-party app that was popular in Australia, somehow got their database compromised, and then the bad guy just tried to use the same passwords. So,
but the use case from the end user's point of view is that you've set up Find My iPhone on your devices, and then someone misuses it to lock your own iPhone and asks you to pay money to unlock it.
Yeah, so about passwords being important and about the iTunes, iCloud passwords being important, you should never use that same password with a third-party app if the app needs passwords.
And that's the password you don't want to recycle anywhere else. And that's actually interesting because in many families, people share the same iTunes password with their
kids and
spouses. You know, then you don't have to buy the same app multiple times. You all get it, and one buys it and everyone else gets it for free. Or same thing with songs and movies. One buys it and then the rest can download it. So it's very, very common. And that means if you are a target of an attack, the attacker doesn't have to target you. They can target your kid, and they will gain access to your photo roll and your backups.
Yeah.
I don't think if people realize this, but that's another big problem.
All right, so there's multiple devices, but just you're sharing the content, but then that one password is now being guarded by your 12-year-old.
Sure. Yeah, sure. And then, of course, the fact that two-factor authentication exists to protect, these iCloud accounts, they don't protect the backups or the photo roll.
Yeah.
They do protect you against making purchases, so your credit card is secured. I would rather have my credit card stolen than my private pictures stolen. And I think this is what's true also for most, at least for these celebrities. The other things we've seen in the mobile world, we had these Android apps which were monetized in an unusual way. Now, if you think about monetization of content in general, I'm writing about this in the editorial for the threat report coming out on Monday. It wasn't always obvious that the way we will monetize content and entertainment online, the way we do it is ads. Originally, 20 years ago, when the web was young, of course, the web had no ads, and we didn't know how it's going to be monetized. We thought there was going to be some kind of payment system where people pay for content. Stupid us, of course, that didn't happen. Instead, we got this ad world, and all these free apps that you can download for your phone aren't free. We know that, and you know that. Either there's in-app purchases, or there's profiling, or there's ads. But these two apps broke the rules, or somehow got out of this mechanism. I'm talking about Prized and Songs for Android, and that was different.
These are the. What you tell me?
These are the mining apps.
Right, which one of them I don't think broke the rules of such, and one of them I think. Well, so that's the question, though, because one of the Android guys said that like we can see this as a legitimate business model, and if it were overtly done, yes, it could be. It was just kind of buried in the fine print. I believe the one guy, it was either Georgia or Kentucky or something. The one guy from Prized was promising thousands of prizes, and clearly it was sort of a pyramid scheme, and he didn't really have thousands of prizes yet. But he was trying to set up he was trying to put the cart in front of the horse, get people to join the program, but he wouldn't have survived a lawsuit. So if he hadn't pulled his out really quickly, some slim lawyer would have thrown a class action suit at him, and he maybe could have won technically, but he would have been bankrupted to do so. So that guy looked like he fled because he was making too many claims up front for something that didn't really. It was vaporware, and he would have gotten nailed by.
But there's something in here that I sort of like. I sort of like the idea that if the user agrees to it, he would pay for an application, or for example with songs, he would pay for entertainment by having his mobile device, having it mined for cryptocurrencies for someone else. There's quite a bit of computing power here, not enough to do Bitcoin mining, but some easier.
I think a more legitimate. If someone really wants to turn that into a legitimate business, though, it's like let my PC mine for cryptocurrency from an account, and then that account tie into free mobile apps that have no ads, because the processing power on the phone is kind of negligible for that. But you could actually.
Well, it's of course it's not as good as the latest PC, but these aren't bad.
The one thing
remember, I've compared the computing power of these. For example, this has more computing power and memory than the rover we have on Mars right now, and it actually has much more computing power than first grade supercomputer. So they have multiple cores, they have lots of memory, lots of hard drive.
And the prized code, I did have the guys check. It did only want to do it if the phone wasn't too hot.
I was charging.
It was charged.
And was idle.
Had a decent battery life, right? There was free memory, so it wasn't actually. It was being conscientious, and it only wanted to use 100 megabytes per month of the data plan, something like this.
Yeah. So there were limits on how it was monetized.
Right. So it really was something, but it just kind of buried what it was doing in the EULA somewhere. But we enjoy reading EULAs actually. Funny enough. The Indian one with the Bollywood song finder, that was, I think that was rolled back before it was actually kind of publicly known that it had been there because it made the app unstable, and then they got a lot of negative reviews. So that one was. But
I guess the bottom line is Google kicked all of these out from Google Play. So Google didn't like at least these
implementations.
Yes.
Yeah, and the question. Well, who knows if there's more there now? But that's the funny thing about Android permissions is that you say yes to these permissions, and they could be doing things like mining for cryptocurrency in the background. Nobody actually reads the EULA. So
another thing about EULAs is something we blogged about yesterday, which is that the new version of Windows 8.1 for mobile changes the way you connect to Wi-Fi. They call it Smart Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi Sense.
Wi-Fi Sense.
It makes a lot of sense.
It makes one option they have in these devices is that you check a box and it will automatically connect to Wi-Fi network, and it will accept the end user license agreement for you.
I could check that box, though. I'm not going to check that box. But
so you never see the end user license agreement. You literally never see it, and it will accept it for you. It will click yes, I agree, and you're online, which is great from the usage point of view, but it probably wouldn't stand in court.
They can't stand in court anyway, except if they warned you that this is not a secure network and use at your own risk. That's really all they want to say.
Right.
And then the other part of the Wi-Fi Sense is you can share with your friends. So I could check the boxes here and share with my Outlook contacts, my Skype contacts, or my Facebook friends.
Which means if you have a password to a Wi-Fi network that I don't have a password for, but we are friends, if I'm close to Sean and the network is there, my machine will automatically, without me knowing, getting online to a private Wi-Fi. And I get
Camilla would love that.
Camilla is our IT security guy.
All right, so I could give people, my Facebook friends, access to F-Secure's network, and they won't need to type in the password for that. We're going to test this further, actually, but making the EULA even less enforceable.
And the last thing about mobile before we move on is Xiaomi the Chinese, one of the fastest growing mobile phone company in the world. There was quite a bit of noise about their devices sending or calling home and sending information from the devices without user being aware of this at all. So we tested that a month ago and found out that the claims were absolutely true. That's exactly what they were doing. So we made it public. And Xiaomi actually responded very quickly. They pushed out an over-the-air update to all their handsets, which we also tested, and it actually fixed everything.
Yeah, I think some people were a little worried based on our post that we were trying to say there's something nefarious happening, which was not what we were saying. Just that this was rather a loud way of going about contact, and it was calling home even if they hadn't signed up for the cloud stuff.
Yeah, and basically,
so now they've adjusted it so it doesn't send home that type of information unless the user opts in.
Yeah, which is the way it should be. Yeah, exactly. All right, so let's talk about Mac malware, which is also covered once again in the threat report, which comes out on Monday. So we have a little bit of new Mac malware. I think the rate is fairly stable. It continues to be bad enough that yes, there actually is a use case of using anti-malware products on your Mac, but no, the situation isn't out of hand, and it's obviously quite a bit better situation than it is on your Windows devices. Actually, it's even better on Macs than it's on your Android phones. So the most problematic platforms are Windows computers, then Android phones, then Mac OS X. There's one interesting case, though, or actually were there two coin stealers that we found.
So cryptocurrency, I guess stealing wallets or stealing cryptocurrency. So one was an app bundled as a cryptocurrency organizer, I suppose, aiming at that because someone who needs a cryptocurrency app would necessarily have, or more likely have rather, cryptocurrency to steal. And the other was an office, a backdoor office type of application that was looking for cryptocurrency on the devices as well. So people trying to pirate Office software, getting their Bitcoin wallets stolen. Yeah. Why would it have Bitcoins? They should be rich and can afford to buy Office software, right? So
maybe they're not rich, just wealthy.
Yeah, they've got lots of. They're land poor. They're Bitcoin poor.
Well, if it's still in Bitcoins, they don't have any real money. They just Bitcoin.
Bitcoins, yeah.
But it's sort of like given, like if you're looking for a Bitcoin-related applications, highly likely you have Bitcoins already, which means they're worth stealing. So these weren't trying to mine; they were trying to steal existing coins you already had. Yeah. All right. Then Gameover Zeus, one of the success stories of H1.
Yeah, success or not.
Or not.
Yeah. Success, yes, in that the disruption to the Gameover Zeus botnet did acquire the keys to the CryptoLocker ransomware that was being dropped by the botnet. A lot of CryptoLocker attacks that were successful at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. So the disruption did disrupt the botnet. It did get access to the keys that had been generated by CryptoLocker. It did not, however, arrest the author of CryptoLocker, Slavic, and we're now seeing variants of CryptoLocker in the wild re-emerging. So game on, Zeus.
Unfortunately, yeah.
And the activity we've seen thus far, it's so Mikko Suominen, who's our analyst most familiar with Gameover Zeus, is that the peer-to-peer communications have been replaced with the DGA-based downloader. The DDoS functions have been removed. I guess they're not a fully operational botnet. They don't need to DOS any banks that they're trying to rob at the moment. The RSA public key has been changed. So either he doesn't trust his RSA key for some reason, thanks to the takedown, or else the author is actually not planning to really operate this himself anymore, and he's got a new buyer. Maybe he's selling this as a kit.
It's a different guy.
As a kit, yeah. And so that the RSA public key could belong to the kit owner. Suominen's comment to that was like, thankfully, he didn't open source Gameover Zeus. So the Gameover Zeus is written by the original the author of the original version of Zeus. And years ago, there was two banking Trojans that were going head-to-head in the kit business. There was Zeus and there was SpyEye. Something happened. There were some rumors that the Zeus author retired. There were some rumors that the SpyEye and then sold out to SpyEye. There was the rumors was that the SpyEye guy maybe hacked him. But anyway, the end result was the source code for Zeus got dumped onto the internet and open source.
Gazillion versions came up.
Right, because open source software is beloved by all, and like other open source platforms that went open source around the time, like Android, lots of vendors moved into that space and started supporting the platform, and an ecosystem built up around it that actually, if it was the SpyEye guy who leaked the source code, it backfired because there's no SpyEye anymore,
right.
And there's a huge Zeus and Zeus forked ecosystem that exists, and so Gameover was the Zeus 2.0 essentially from the original author. For a long, long time, this ecosystem of little mini Zeuses protected him. Because if the law enforcement was going to go after anybody, it was these other gangs that were just sort of running them as kits, as opposed to him who, he had sort of the real knowledge as to how to upgrade this thing. So Gameover Zeus was the only one that was peer-to-peer. And I guess had the resources to tie into somebody who did CryptoLocker, which was a ransomware that actually does encrypt your files as opposed to locking onto the PC, and did it in a way that you're not going to be able to decrypt them. There was no flaws in the implementation.
And the algorithms were strong.
Right, so the only way to unencrypt would be to have the keys. So the disruption was successful in taking down the botnet. I don't know how the remediation effects of progress has been with contacting customers of ISPs saying our logs show that your IP address connected to this peer-to-peer botnet. Please run this removal tool. Hopefully, we can get some word from Europol in the near future as to how well that succeeded in Europe, and then I don't know if the FBI is going to follow up in the States.
But one clear thing out of this was the fact that because some of the keys were recovered, there is now a website where some of the crypto locker victims can decrypt their files.
Yeah, and I've downloaded that tool, and it worked on the file that I created for a blog post. So we ran it on a test system and encrypted some files, and it does work. Or at least the key that I generated back in October was in the cache of keys that was recovered. The concerns here is that if Slavic is building a new botnet, and the activity that our analyst has seen is that it's being spread via the Cutwell spam botnet, and then it's going out and downloading new versions or additional versions of Cutwell. So it's building a new botnet. It's not really doing anything other than building itself at this point. Not that many variants, but what's he going to do with this new botnet? If there's any orphans from the previous one out there, maybe he tries to grab them again. And in my contribution to the threat report, I don't see how much further you can escalate this when the adversary has a tool at his disposal like CryptoLocker. Because the only reason he didn't CryptoLocker the 2 million machines that he had was because then he wouldn't have a botnet. But if law enforcement decides to take away any future botnets, then the bots could self-destruct and
we would retaliate,
CryptoLocker everything, and then destroy the key. And then he could walk away from the business and release that source code out into the world.
You're giving out two bad ideas. I hate the way you think, Sean.
So if they're going to disrupt him in the future, we really need the human component of arresting the author of the really bad malware. So yes, it's a success for H1, but H2 is worrisome. So we're watching the developments of that one closely.
Right. So then we have the case HAVEX.
Yes.
That's tied to industrial control systems, also known as SCADA or SCADA systems.
And the energy sector, and our analysis of it kept me awake in June, talking to reporters quite late when I was visiting London. So in January, CrowdStrike blogged about a campaign called Energetic Bear. There's a bear in the woods. That's the reference to the bear, they think. It was a campaign that was targeting energy sector companies via energy sector forums where people would be chatting about stuff. We became interested, therefore, in the samples, and we looked at 88 of those samples, and our analyst, David, followed some of those samples back to command and control servers, where one of them, I guess he encountered, didn't have, it wasn't locked down like it was supposed to be. In fact, there was a note.
Had open directory, so I could browse through, and he even followed the notes of the developers. One of the notes was that we should really lock down these folders, which weren't locked down.
So he said, aha, forensics.
Looking down those folders would have taken less time to make that than that it took to make that note.
So he discovered in the content that he was able to then access and do forensics on a payload that scanned networks for ICS, industrial control system devices. And through the research there, we discovered that that payload to scan the network for ICS devices was embedded in Trojans or installers, Trojanized installers for legitimate software that 3 different vendors we discovered. Four, okay, well, or hosting on their websites. So,
and that's one of the most evil ways I could imagine of distributing malware of this kind. Imagine this: you have a hardware device, a factory control device from a reputable manufacturer, and you go to that manufacturer's website, you go to support pages, you download
the software you need to control. So the software you need to install on your Windows machine to control the ICS device in your network.
And
so
that's infected. And that's the one that has a Trojan. So they went through the trouble of hacking into these various pages and finding a way of modifying the official download to contain the Trojan. It's very, very, talk about targeted attacks, that's pretty targeted.
And so then the question was, so why, okay, so was this energy sector related, but the industrial control system companies that we found whose pages had been compromised to host the Trojanized installers. They had lots of customer screenshots on their websites, and you had things that looked like bottling plants or like giant shrink wrap factories, like huge spools of shrink wrap material. So not energy related, but just like manufacturing related. So
factories.
Question being, so what's the connection to this energy sector stuff from earlier in the year? And the connection from what we've seen thus far in other attacks that look very similar. So just the other day in Norway, there's like oil sector stuff, JP Morgan sector, so financial sector, oil sector in Norway, energy sector forums, manufacturing sector. All this stuff seems to be gathered by a group, so privateers necessarily, not necessarily like a nation state group, but people selling to a nation state more likely. Stuff that they want to gather so that if you wanted to shut down a bottling plant, because if you're going to disrupt a water supply, then the military is going to be busy delivering bottled water. But if you can shut down the bottled water plant, well, then you can actually like make people feel pain. So the type of targets they were going after was very broad, but you could think of lots of different things that a particular nation state might be interested in disrupting in order to push their political position.
But it's important to note that HAVEX didn't actually affect the actual devices. It was just trying to find them, basically fingerprinting them. Yeah. We don't really fully understand why.
Of course, the device, the point that was scanning the network for the ICS devices had a back door, so that then that Windows machine could then be used.
So it could have been fingerprinting, trying to locate the right target, sort of like what Stuxnet was doing.
Well, it was fingerprinting, but then the back door to that device, someone could just remotely connect it in and then put the ICS device into overdrive and cause it to fry itself, I suppose. So you don't need to actually infect the ICS device when you're not dealing with an air-gapped machine.
True. So this is it's another indication which points us to the direction that there will be in the future more and more cases targeting factory automation or any part of the Internet of Things as a whole.
Yeah, and this is an extension of cyber espionage that it doesn't look like a nation state. It looks more like crimeware, but it looks like crimeware done by contractors who would be selling it upstream to somebody who is a nation state. Because they used compromised CNC servers and then kind of abandoned them when they were done. Other nation states we've seen clean up their mess very quickly. NSA, GCHQ, they don't leave, as soon as you discover one of their CNC servers, it disappears. You never saw it again. And the Chinese stuff we've seen in the past points back to China because they're just kind of noisy about their OPSEC.
I have junior admins running their CFC.
Something. Everything about the Havocs, also known as Crouching Yeti, or sometimes the group behind it, Dragonfly. Dragonfly doesn't necessarily seem like it's a nation state, but rather privateers working for a nation state. So it's not Northrop Grumman, it's just the guy who used to steal credit cards and is now stealing nation state worthy info and selling it to nation states.
So if you're watching, greetings to Dragonfly. All right. So Sean, what's your Facebook password?
My Facebook password. I don't remember my Facebook password.
He doesn't remember his Facebook. Why don't you remember your Facebook password? You go to Facebook regularly.
Actually, not so much lately, but we can blog about that later. I stopped using it, not with a bang, but kind of a whimper. But certain passwords, I just kind of copy and paste from a password manager.
Why do you do that?
So I don't have to remember the password.
So he doesn't have to remember, because passwords are problematic. They have been problematic for a decade. They will continue to be problematic. And all the advice you read about password usage sucks. You know, never use the same password twice. Always make a long password. Never write it down. These were advices which worked fine when you had 4 passwords. Now, every single one of us requires 100 passwords. So these guidances are absolutely incorrect. That's not the way to do this.
Or they're going to fall on deaf ears, and people giving the advice should know better that it's going to fall on deaf ears. And I liked very much John Oliver's last week, Tonight piece that he did around Black Hat, the 1.2 billion supposedly compromised accounts that the Russian hackers had gathered, but then it got dropped down to I think 400 million after some vetting. Yeah, he was on there saying like, so we should all change our passwords, but yeah, here's the thing, we're not going to do that. So which is true, right? So it's cumbersome, but it's important to stress though. Like several of the cases we've been talking about, it's password stealers are malware that is prevalent. You can do lots of things with the passwords. The problem with password securing things like iCloud is that the username is known to everybody if you know the email address. Right. And the password's been around since Open Sesame, but you could only say Open Sesame in front of the right cave, and you didn't know where the cave was because it was also obfuscated or security through obscurity. Where's the door that I need to say Open Sesame to? What's your banking online username?
I can't tell you.
Yeah, but you know you're banking online. Yeah, that's also a secret. So for really secure accounts like banks, or even our domain accounts, I mean, you may be able to figure out what IT's pattern is, but it's not
so obvious.
I don't throw it out there into public space like I do my email.
My banking login is it's a row of random numbers.
Yeah,
really, it's no.
And it would be ludicrous to think that I could log into my domain account with my email address, but we log into everything on the internet with an email address, and that's not secret. So you only have one secret protecting you. I know your I know the login username for your Twitter account. Like you do? You don't tell anybody. Okay. Exactly right. So you've got, unless you turn on the 2-factor, it would be very nice if you could have 2 factors just by having a secret login name.
And that's one advice to celebrities. Like if you're worried about this iCloud thing, make sure that the login to your iCloud account is an email account nobody knows. Like make up a new one.
And not just celebrities, but everybody.
Well, especially if you're targeting.
Well, yeah, but just like everybody. So when I set up my phone, I created a new email address just for that phone. Because having a Windows phone, I didn't really have any sort of ecosystem to tie it into. So I know this is difficult with like Google or Apple, but if you can create an email address that you use just for online accounts and you don't actually use it as an email address, then you've got something that can't be known unless a database actually leaks.
So do you know what's the email address that Jennifer Lawrence actually had protecting her iCloud account? It was jlosbutt@gmail.com. True story.
Is this alleged, or is this
no? It's actually that's what it seemed to be. That's because that used to be her email address. Some of her domains even had it. So wasn't very hard to find.
Yeah, and I've brought this up with Facebook in the past about being a security issue, and they said I could blog about it, but they didn't. So, back when the Syrian Electronic Army was hacking different Twitter accounts, there are people with, like Mike Tyson and some other B-list celebrities on Facebook who have millions of followers on Facebook. And if you click on the I forgot my password on Facebook, you will see the first letter, some asterisks, the last letter, and then a domain. And some of the people that I checked on that, it was clearly some hosting company admin, and you could very easily figure out what the email address would be, because it was their domain at their celebrity website, and so you could make out like, yeah, I think that's probably admin at, and then their domain name, so the name of the celebrity. So you could very easily then craft a phishing message to someone at that email address with the proper context, and then try to gain access to Facebook. The Facebook account that has millions of followers, and deface it sort of like some of the accounts on Twitter. Facebook has since, because I was asking them about the security questions, they've since gotten rid of their security questions, and they have other sort of implementations in place of, like, if your IP address is not connecting, if you're not connecting from an IP address that is normal to them, they will make you do some double authentication. You have to go through some quizzes, and then smartly, once you get in, even if you can authenticate, I've gone into, because I've done this when I've gone to Munich and tried logging into Facebook, and they made me
without a VPN.
Without a VPN, right? VPN is helpful to have to avoid stuff like this. But I went to Munich last year. Facebook challenged me. I logged in, and immediately I went to the settings to see what I could change, and they locked me out of critical things.
Right.
So I don't know how foolproof it is, but like I did bring it up to them. They did say, like, well, they've got 1 billion people to worry about, so that every bit of security they put in there that creates a customer support case. But there are some things about I forgot my password that are not great. So I pointed it out to you that I could really easily reverse what your account name was, and then you used a trick with Gmail where you can sort of add plus and obfuscate. So I guess now you have a obfuscated 32-character long email address that would make it impossible to figure out what the actual email address is for your personal Facebook account, which you don't really use except to syndicate your Twitter. I think there's some
I think I logged in last year.
Yeah. So that's these are the kind of things that, like, celebrity folks probably don't realize is exposing them. Are the I forgot my password feature of sites like Facebook.
Exactly. Or access to their email. If somebody somehow they can figure out access to their email, they don't have to do anything else. They can just reset the password.
Reset the passwords, and so it's critical to figure out what are the primary accounts that you need to protect, and use unique passwords that you don't share across any other services.
Another thing for these celebrities to understand is that this isn't a theoretical threat. If you are a celebrity, there are people who are obsessed with you. They will launch an APT attack against you, which they will keep trying and trying until they succeed. So you really have to do the things to secure your account. It's not theoretical at all.
And it's not just celebrities. It's so I 3 years ago, when researching Facebook spam, curious as to where the material that these ads for the click per action, like click on this, and they would be an image of some young lady, or this young lady drowned, or you'll never believe what her father did when he saw this video, and there's a thumbnail there. So wanting to know where these images came from, doing reverse image searches on them, I came across websites I wish I hadn't come across, to be frank. There are people who are crawling the web and scraping these things, and have websites devoted to material of anybody that they can find that they think is any kind of attractive. They will scrape and trade the images. So live your life. Don't let anybody tell you not to live your life. Don't be paranoid, but do be mindful that if you are a human being, there's other human beings who want to look at you, and you're more at risk if you're female than you are male. You're young if you are what your peers consider to be attractive, and if the more well-known you are. I mean, it just increases the amount at which someone wants to target your accounts. If you're the boyfriend of someone who has an attractive girlfriend, this was even in some of the forums in this recent hack.
If you can't get the girl, get the boyfriend.
Yeah, and it's not just strangers either. It's actually probably more likely peers, because some of the instructions they had for people who wanted to do this was like, you can use your Facebook friend list to gather the information of the people that you want to target. So it might be a generational
thing. There's a pretty girl in your class who want to get her pictures. That's how they advise others.
Of going about to do the data mining that you need in order to figure out the questions, the answers to the security questions. Which, by the way, Apple's security questions somewhere. I remember yesterday morning, so I was thinking about this. I was really annoyed by the fact my iTunes forced me to create a security question for Apple like about a year ago, and I've got some screenshots somewhere of. I guess there were 5 to 7 choices. I didn't like any of them because they were too easy to research. And I kept saying, no thanks.
What's your first pet name?
It was more like something like, what's your 4th grade teacher? And I'm like, yeah, nobody on Facebook that I was in 4th grade with will remember that. Which I don't think that person's going to hack me, but still, it's like there's not a good answer for these questions. Apple, in my memory, had really bad security questions, and I was really annoyed to be forced, because I kept saying cancel, cancel, until at some point I wanted to add an app, and I had to answer security questions before it would let me proceed. And I didn't blog about it at the time, but I was not very happy about those questions. And so among the things that need to be addressed, besides enabling 2-factor for backups, Apple really needs to take a look at what they've got.
Apple doesn't have to worry about any of these, because next week they will release iPhone 6, and everybody will forget anything about
use your fingerprints and whatever else that they've done.
And the new iPad is coming out, and it's going to be great. People will forget all these problems immediately. All right, I think we're pretty much ready to wrap up. Last thing is about Windows XP, and there's a really simple thing to do about Windows XP. If you have Windows XP, get rid of Windows XP, and all your problems will be solved. So the threat report will be out on Monday. Thank you for watching, and we'll be back. Cheers.